Nintendo has a bunch of really cheap indie games on their storefront.
Too many indie games.
Are they all bad? And is this a problem?
It's a pretty big problem.
Yeah. Hot take! Before we get into today's story, there's something I wanted to talk to you guys about. Nintendo is a very complex topic, and we are talking about indie games. And when it comes to indie games with Nintendo, there's one person I know that has a lot of information about that, and that's this guy right here. Jay, let him know what you've been on before.
Well, I've been on Positives.
Yeah, actually, you worked at Sega in a Positives episode, so
Yes,
that happened.
I got to live my childhood dream as a Sega kid.
Yeah.
It's crazy, though, because I ended up actually shifting over more to Nintendo stuff in the end. Before
I think
that,
everyone did because Sega really doesn't exist anymore.
There's not too much to talk about anymore. Sega Mini's cool, though. But yeah, Nintendo enthusiast. I was the indie dude there. A lot of people call me the indie guy. And then over for the past year, I've been covering indie games on the Switch, which was a challenge I was far too naive when I got into. I decided to cover every single indie game every week. Did you know, Shane, there are 20 to 30 new indie games every week on the eShop?
It sure looks like it. But yeah, when it comes to indie games, this guy's the pro. He knows what's going on. And that's why we're going to be talking about this specific topic today. And that topic is, Kotaku brought up a recent article where they exposed this whole thing that's going on, where indie games on the Nintendo Switch eShop are basically being sold for pennies in order to get to the top of the rankings. Now, Jay, how does that actually work?
So the Switch eShop sucks for any indies to find themselves, or to find a good indie game. Like if you go on the Switch eShop right now and you try to find a good indie game, it's going to be tough, especially when you compare it to what was available on the Wii U.
Sure.
Before on the Wii U, you could go into indie games, you could go into categories, there was featured stuff, you could upvote what was good. There's just far less features on the Switch. There's more than what they had at launch.
Yeah, there definitely is, because it is bare bones now, but yeah.
But it's getting better, but pretty much after an indie title, splashes out with all 20 other titles, it just gets buried.
Yes.
Unless it's one of those crazy good games like, this guy here, Hollow Knight, then that's going into the bestseller.
Yeah.
People should care about Hollow Knight. Hollow Knight is the best indie game, and I will never shut up about it. So,
Shovel Knight's better. Doesn't matter. Just,
Shovel Knight's okay. So, unless it's the bestseller like that, you just won't find it. So developers have found a way to basically cheat the algorithm, and one studio who's been very vocal about this on Twitter has been Atui, which is run, it's an independent studio run by Jules Watson, which some of you might know as the developer behind Renegade Kid, who's done a lot of 3DS titles and has been very active in the indie scene. So recently over the summer, he did I believe it was 80 or 90% sale on all of his games. And he ended up selling, when I saw it, that was crazy, but he actually shared that he sold 20,000 units of his games. So if you assume that these games are going for about $10 and he's, selling them for $1 each, that's about $20,000 of revenue. So it works.
Yeah. I mean, discounting the game so it gets to the top of the sales board makes a lot of sense. When you bring this up, I didn't really think about this, but around the time of holiday last year, I actually was on the storefront. I had a little bit of extra cash to spend because it's the holidays, and who doesn't have $10 here or there? And there was a bunch of games being sold for $1, and I was like, okay, they sucked, each and every one. But they were at the top of the list, and I didn't know how they got there. That's how they got there, was because people were heavily discounting the games to go all the way to the top so more people could buy them. So theoretically, if you have a terrible game, and I'm talking a game that is just awful, you could make it go at so much of a discount that it would go all the way to the top, and then you could up the price, and for a little bit there, people would be buying that game at a higher price.
Don't give people ideas, please. There's so much trash on the indie store. But yeah, theoretically, that is something that people could do.
Don't give them ideas, but yeah, you could. They've been doing it. I've seen them do it.
Yeah.
It's been nuts because look. There are a lot of good indie games. I think Nintendo deserves a lot of praise here because there's a lot of game developing companies out there that have been publishing independent games, sending them out to a bunch of different platforms. We've seen success and struggle on Steam. We've seen Sony varying degrees of success, trying a lot of indie games on the Vita platform and then transferring it over to the PlayStation 4. Kind of a mixed bag there. Some worked, some didn't. Xbox has been very good with their independent independent development group.
ID at Xbox.
Yes, there have been a bunch of indie games that have been released there. In fact, one day I will be talking about all the indie games that Microsoft has been sharing off that you really only get on their platform. But even then, Nintendo is like this prized possession that if you think about indie games right now going on the PlayStation 4, Xbox One, they're limited to a console that stays at home. But with the Switch, no matter what the game is, it basically becomes a home experience and a portable experience at the exact same time.
Right. The Switch is unique too because it has that touch screen.
Yeah.
And what you're seeing is, I don't know what happened in the back end between the Wii U and the Switch. When the Switch launched, not anybody could get on the eShop. It was very much curated. And then at one point, they're just like, whatever, everybody comes in. So you see a lot of developers that had games already on mobile platforms now that can port that over to the Switch.
Yes.
Because you got touchscreen. The Switch can play pretty much any indie game out there. There's nothing that's overly taxing, and there's just more control options with the Switch. So now that's in part what's causing that flood. As well, game development is more accessible now than ever, thanks to platforms like Unity, which anybody watching, you can go get a copy of Unity right now for free, as long as your studio doesn't make more than $100,000. So pretty much any starting indie dev can get a copy of Unity for free. You can develop your own game, and then it's just a matter of going through then finding a publisher to go on or filling out the paperwork, doing it yourself. And the fact is, Nintendo specifically, a lot of these developers grew up on Nintendo, so it's a dream for them to say, my game is on a Nintendo platform. So even the Nintendo is just this magnet of games. And right now you've even got like the AAA developers bringing all of their old games, porting it, and the Switch is just becoming this platform of pretty much any game you want to play. You can find it on the Switch.
That can translate to quality and garbage. It can become a lot of really good games or a lot of really bad games. And unfortunately, that's been an issue. The idea of curation from Nintendo hasn't been exactly strong lately. They've been really good at sharing stuff out. Like, for instance, hey, we were just talking about Nintendo Directs, right? Indie Directs. Nindy Directs have become a really big deal for independent developers to release independent games. Plus, the fact it really is that Nintendo has been shown off to share some of their IP with independent game developers. Most recently, we saw Crypt of the Dancer, which has its own Zelda thing.
Right, Cadence of Hyrule.
Yes.
Which is a fantastic game. By the way.
Right. And so stuff like that. If Nintendo is willing to share their IPs with independent game developers, we can see a lot more exciting games being developed in the future. Regardless of all that, though, there is still a curation problem. To begin with, you gotta accept that. If you think there isn't a curation problem on the Nintendo eShop, you are wrong. There is. There are a lot of really bad games that were not made with any heart, passion, or desire to be a success, but because they're on the platform, they can be sold at a small amount and kind of look like they're super valuable, so a lot of people pick them up even though they're really, really bad experiences.
Yeah, and what Nintendo's doing with the Nindies is great. It's a great program, and oftentimes those are curated games. Those games are pretty much surefire hits. I have yet to really see one game that was showcased on a Nindie showcase, which was like, this isn't really that good. Most of them are good. And then you have, the garbage tier, which is a lot of them. Like I said, 20 to 30 every week. And out of those, I would say maybe 5 are worth looking at. So you're looking at about a 25% ratio of good to bad games.
Yeah.
So you kind of got that middle ground that Nintendo just can't focus on promoting all of it. So they're going to go for, maybe the top 5, the top 10%. But is that really fair? I'm going to say no, because you miss out on this other chunk. And can Nintendo really kind of should indie developers all depend that much on Nintendo to elevate their game? I'd say no. I don't think any one single. I really like that there was a kind of upvote mechanic before in the Wii U eShop, so that the community could spot games for themselves, and that's kind of what you have in Steam. And it's a great way to find indie games. You just search for indies on Steam, and then you can rank by just filter for what's being positively reviewed, and it's like, boom, these are the good games.
Sure. Organized by genre, organized by creator, organized by purchases or sales or downloads. What would actually make a lot of sense too? Organizing how many sales have happened through overall income. Basically what this means is if, wow, this could actually fix Nintendo stuff now that I think about it. If you were to sell a game at $1 and a whole bunch of people bought the game at $1, but they're not really happy with their purchase, then that means that once the game goes up to $10, because they were trying to get it to the top of the list, at that $10 mark, Now, not a lot of people are buying it because they're not really enjoying what it is, and it's definitely not worth that $10 investment. So what you could do is you could get an overall ratio of money earned through all the sales and everything, and actually say, okay, this game is sold a lot of copies at $10. Sold a lot at $1 too, but we're seeing a lot of people still buying it at 10, which means that that game actually has sustained its value at that higher price point. We should rise that higher into the marketplace so people can see it. Just basic curation like that would be such a smart idea, but we don't even have any of the basic stuff like upvotes.
Right. And I just realized right now that Steam, Steam and Switch are very similar in the indie scene, but the Switch is unique in the sense that it hasn't developed, no console has developed really that great of a curation platform like Steam, because this is unprecedented. There's never been this flood of indie games coming out. And Steam figured this out years ago.
Yeah.
But even when you look at the Nintendo platform, you have to rely on a lot of website reviews or content creators that are reviewing these games.
Like us.
But there's just so many games now, they can't keep up. Content creators just don't have enough time in a day to review all the good ones, or actually to go through all of them, find the good ones, make a review. So even if you're an educated consumer and you're looking through and you're like, oh, I wonder if this game is good, and you see, like, you go to search for a review, chances are you won't find it, because unless a few content creators have already started picking on it and have already brought it up to the light that, hey, you should pay attention to this, that game's going to get buried, and that could be someone's 2-3 years worth of work and effort.
That's true.
That got buried there, because the biggest challenge of an indie developer now is not so much developing the game, it's getting a marketing plan out there to really bring that game to light and get people to notice them.
Yeah, there have been tons and tons of games that have been sent into Rerez over the years. There was a point when once every week I would get a list of like 20 games. And it would be 20 games I'd have to play and look through, and nobody has the time to do that. No single person can play 20 games every week forever, expecting to go through every single game. The best you can do is play a couple of minutes of each game and see if it warrants more further exploration. So unfortunately, you basically rate the game out of the first couple of minutes of playing it, and if it doesn't provide any kind of idea that it's going to grow beyond that, the game goes away. And there are many other just regular players out there that are not reviewers that are playing games like that and not really getting enough of an experience from it and just going on to the next game as quick as they can. On the storefront right now, there are, I would have to say, a couple of amazing indie games that are really fantastic that no one is playing, no one's talking about, because they just happen to have sunk down below the threshold of that first couple of pages. And it sucks, because those, like, you can tell the developers put a lot of time and a lot of effort into making those games, but yeah, after a couple of minutes, it's done, it doesn't have a life, and then it's gone forever, because they haven't created some system to just push it back up to the top.
Right. And they were on the right path with the Wii U eShop, and I really don't know how the same company can take that many steps back when you had a system that people love, people enjoy. And one thing I absolutely miss, just as a little side note from the Wii U eShop, is the freaking music.
Yeah.
The Wii shopping channel had it. The Wii U eShop had it. You had this little jingle, and they even changed it every 3-4 months to give you something new. You went on your birthday, and I think there were balloons, if I remember right.
Yeah, there was.
Now you get nothing. You get dead silence. You're in a void of silence. Go browse the games, find them for yourselves.
It's kind of weird, because what Nintendo was doing with the eShops before, their storefronts online, there used to be this kind of feel to it, this experience to it, where it's like, I'm going to the store, I'm buying something, and they kind of lost that, and it really sucks, because the Switch is a console that has so much character and personality to it, that there's so much going on with it, but it seems to have less than what the Wii U had, but it still managed to be more successful. By that I mean, when you started the Wii U, the main menu was unlike any other main menu you'd ever seen. You had characters walking around, you had all this stuff going on, and the store felt kind of like that too. It felt like a community storefront. But when you turn on the Switch, it does not feel the same way. It feels more like a console that maybe Apple would design, like very simple interface, very simple to get around, and I feel like some of the magic has been lost. And I'm not saying that affects how you buy games on there, but if people really enjoy going to the storefront and just being there to listen to the music, they're likely going to buy more things. I mean, that's just the way it is.
It's a good point. A lot of people, at least myself, I go to the eShop not to really browse so much anymore. I'd rather just browse on my desktop because the interface is better in browser.
Yeah, that's fair.
I find most people that go into the eShop now, they're going with the mission of, I know what I want, or I saw this game release, so it's easy to find. You go in recent releases, and bam, somewhere in the last 40 games, you're going to find the one game you want. Whereas before with the Wii U, you could have been bored, and you're just, I think the 3DS, okay, the Wii U was better than the 3DS, so we're not even going to talk about that. But the Wii U eShop, you had all these categories, there was a lot of imagery, and you have that on the eShop in a browser. So I do enjoy shopping for the Switch eShop through the browser. But yeah, they really went for a minimalist approach on the Switch itself, and it's unfortunate.
Yeah,
I really hope we can see that change.
I hope so too, because as we move forward, if Nintendo doesn't offer some kind of fix or solution to this problem, you're likely going to start to see issues where a game company might just exist out of nowhere and produce, let's say, 20 games a month, or how many games they can get out, maybe a couple of like little shadow corporations that they own, and start making really simple, very cheap, very bad games and selling them for super ridiculously small amounts just to kind of bulk up the storefront, and that way someone can sell a bunch of bad games quick. Not every developer is doing that, and to be fair, there's a lot of developers out there that are being squashed by those kind of mechanics. Yeah. And I really feel like that's not fair. There are so many incredibly good game developers out there making amazing experiences, and to have that stuff lost is just unfair to everyone.
What I'm concerned about is also the value, the devaluation of gaming. And I'm seeing that in so many aspects. We can talk about the Epic Game Store and how many games they give out for free.
Yeah.
We can talk about, if an indie developer is now having to resort to devaluing their games by 90%, and then that doesn't even consider all the cuts that they have to do. They have to give a royalty to the publisher. And then if they are publishing, so a royalty to Nintendo, but then if they're also allied with a publisher, they have another cut that they have to give there, leaving them very little. It just changes the perspective of what is a game worth.
Yeah.
Now, you have systems like Game Pass, you have all these streaming services coming out. The landscape is just changing very much, and what I think we're going to see is you're seeing more of these indie publishers now starting to, so not indie developer, an indie publisher. Best example is Devolver Digital, which is already starting to build a reputation that people know when you're buying a Devolver Digital game, you kind of know what you're expecting in terms of quality, and the price is always around the same range too, $15, $20. And it's kind of that strategy that Nintendo has to not devalue their games. Try to pick up any Mario game for less than half price. You'll never find it half price in the first place.
No. Here's the thing. I know that a lot of people are probably watching and they're just wondering, like, this really affects developers. It doesn't affect us gamers. But here's a parable from long years past. Once upon a time, there was a store called the iOS Store, and on the iOS Store, there was a lot of games. Developers from all over started releasing games as fast as they could, and it was a wonderful time of a whole bunch of crazy, unique, new experiences using an interface and programming architecture that hadn't existed up until that point. Then someone found out if you sell a game for 99 cents and everyone's selling their games at 10, that 99-cent game rises to the top. And a whole bunch of people started making really cheap games really fast. And then another developer was like, what if we give the games away for free and they're always at the top of the store because everyone's downloading it, and then all we have to do is charge for things like cosmetic things, long, weird, stupid objects in games.
Let's put some ads in there.
This is basically what happened to iOS. This is what happened to Android. Those storefronts are a quagmire, a mess. They're so bad that Apple has now introduced Apple Arcade as a way to fix the thing that they broke. And Google, well, they're trying.
They're doing something in their corner.
Play, pass, it doesn't matter. It's not going to work. They've created an interface that is just a joke. Their entire solution to it is a mimic of what Apple did, but they did it without any care whatsoever. And they're also doing Stadia, what the heck that's going to be. But
for another episode.
What matters is this. That entire interface went down because the games were heavily devalued. They didn't make bad games, they devalued the games that they were making, and they weren't making enough money from those specific titles. So if that happens to the Switch, you're going to start to see a whole bunch of indie games being bulk thrown at consumers, and it will destroy the storefront as it stands. Nintendo cannot afford to have that happen. And I know it sounds like this crazy thing. Nintendo would never let that happen, but if they don't start using curation techniques, start enforcing a great way to promote good games, it might start to bite them really, really soon. And we're looking at a really close metric right now where we're getting right beside the release of the next PlayStation, Xbox. And if they figure out a solution to that stuff, and if they find a way to, I don't know, let's say with Microsoft, sell a game on one platform that exists through multiple other platforms, they've suddenly valued a game even higher by making that purchase more valuable.
Right.
So if that starts to happen, you're going to see big changes.
You can't have one or the other. If you're not going to be the gatekeeper like Nintendo is choosing not to be, you need to at least offer the tools so the community can essentially self-regulate itself.
Yeah, self-regulation. I mean, it sucks, but something has to happen. These games deserve to be on top, and the bad games deserve to fail. But folks, what do you think? Are you excited about this whole idea of Nintendo having some kind of control over the storefront and helping out smaller indie developers sell their games? Or do you think it should remain the Wild West, Thunderdome style, everything destroying each other, and hopefully one person survives and it's like a 5-cent game where you just buy hats every $5 you buy more hats? I don't know.
That sounds terrible.
Yeah, but it could happen. Let us know what you think in the comments below.
Keep on playing indie.